The Ziigaat Lush in this market of like, I don't know, 20 IEMs dropping every week is practically an old and reliable piece that could very well be your last purchase that, well, you're ever going to need to make. And the reason for that is the fact that these cost a whopping $179 or 10,600 pesos, which is a mind-boggling amount for anybody who's not really into the hobby. And for that price, is it actually worth it? Does it sound good? Why the is it so expensive? Is it made out of gold? Well, no, but like it might very well be to those who are like looking for a reference sounding IEM without going for the rated 18 fitment. And with that said, I'll help you find out if this should be something that you should actually consider for your next purchase, or if it should be something that you should maybe pass up on within the 4 segments that I've built this video on top of. In which case, like, I'd like to start off by showing this email snippet right over here where I ask this specifically from Ziigaat myself, but they don't have any sort of like control over what I say in my review, on top of being transparent enough to be completely fine with me showing this email snippet as a proof. But before that, I need you to know that my preference involves a neutral bright tuning with a slight sub-bass boost, so the Lush is very close to my preferences, meaning I'm essentially going to have a natural bias in favor of the Lush, so make sure to keep that in mind along with taking note of my setup, which involves either a Kali JM6 Pro when I'm out and about, or a TRN Black Pearl when I'm at home. I also use them with like a higher volume at around 50 to 60% when on my laptop, 13% hardware volume on Hibby Music, and 14 to 15% volume when outdoors, as they sound a lot more enjoyable when I crank the volume up a bit, despite having only a 17 ohm impedance rating, which also means that you really won't need a dedicated amp to drive these things properly. However, what's not so great for the price are going to be the limited accessories that these have compared to like the competition, which is like also quite frankly one of the factors that show that they're a bit more dated with the 3 basic silicone ear tips and the meager single-ended cable. Now, those aren't really deal breakers by any means whatsoever, but considering that these are $179 and like there are more IEMs on the same price range and at a lower price range that offers more out of the box, these are a bit more on the disappointing end in terms of the accessories. Despite that, however, you get a pair of these very nice foam ear tips, 2 sets of replacement filters, a faux leather case that offers a lot of structural support, and a stretchy black rubber cable that, well, quite frankly, is a plus if you forget to remove your IEMs a lot when you stand up, as these aren't stiff, which means that like not only won't these break easily by your typical tugs and pulls, but they also have no cable noise when walking or even running actually. Now, on the topic of accessories, I want to talk more about the ear tips and the comfort as a whole. On that topic, ear tips are arguably more subjective than the actual tuning itself, where ear tips contribute like to how an IEM fits inside of your ears, which in turn means like that the way the IEM sound like is quite frankly and quite literally dictated by how they sit in our ears. It's much like how a high-performance vehicle can be limited by the tires that you install into them, as no matter how good like the engine of the entire car is, like if the tires are not up to par, it's not really going to perform well. And on that note, ear tips here are not the best, so I used them with a medium Duno SNS ear tip, as I found these to work quite well for me in both like a comfort and a sound standpoint if I don't wear them too deep. And talking about the comfort, if I said this once, I've said this a million times, okay? The sound doesn't matter if you can't wear the damn thing. In which case, I'm happy to go ahead and say that these are not only light at 4.25 grams per earpiece, but the entire package is only about 30 grams. As for the dimensions, the resin housing itself is a bit larger than my standard for comfort at 24mm for the height, 18.6mm for the width, and 8mm at the thinnest part right over here, which really isn't like an actual issue if it's not for the chonker of the lip, as although my standard for a comfort slip is at 6mm at the widest end, it's not really a round shape, meaning it's thinner on the sides at 5.4mm, whereas the Lush has a 6.3mm lip all around. And I feel that after like just 10 minutes of actually wearing them, especially when I pair it up with the stock stiff ear tips. On that note, that same stiff ear tip causes the driver flex, which is that springy sound, to be all the more annoying when you're just readjusting them or like talking to somebody while you're wearing them. Now at this point on, I'm still a bit on the fence if they're truly actually worth the $179 price tag, and the sound is what's going to tip the scales here. But before we talk about the sound, I'd like to ask you guys to go ahead and turn on the notification bell so that you don't miss any uploads in the future. And to answer if these are worth the price from the sound perspective, I'll be honest with you. This became a staple as soon as I've tried them. Now, I've rated these like at a 3 out of 5 during my stream because it truly sits in the middle of the pack with how neutral they sound like for me. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that this sounds mid, but it's not really something that a lot of people will actually have fun listening to, nor will it be amazing to listen to for like fun and excitement. On which I describe these as the premium vanilla ice cream of IEMs, where like starting from the bass, there's really no smearing here, and they're quite fast sounding at the very least when listening to fast drum segments like the one in Playing God by Polyphia, and there's no roll off in the sub bass, which in turn gives a good sub bass extension. But the quantity doesn't match the quality these presents, and that sentiment carries through the mids, where I'd say that the mids are pleasant to listen to. Where genres like EDM, pop, and rap like Luther by Kendrick Lamar provides a good distinction for the vocals of artists like SZA despite the amount of bass in that track. And on top of that, vocal-centric songs like Hello by Adele is neither recessed nor is it actually forward. And in my experience, it's just the right amount of like the lower to upper mids where it's almost perfectly neutral for my ears. However, since it is neutral, it can also be subject to adjectives like boring or unintriguing, wherein stuff like the treble and air regions are probably the best example of the term boring here, as I'm somebody who looks for a bit more treble emphasis and like crunch for electric guitar riffs, especially in songs like say Iron Man by Black Sabbath or Bohemian Rhapsody's like guitar riff after the operatic segment. However, in the same way that they're like boring and smooth sounding on like the treble area, the swirling sound in songs like Another One Bites the Dust right over here, and other typically ear-piercing noises just like it won't really hurt or be uncomfortable to listen to. Now, you might have heard about like how treble affects the perceived level of detail, and this is probably like the greatest indication for how the technicalities are affected by a more laid-back tuning for treble and air, in which case, soundstage isn't intimate nor is it wide, but it's mostly good enough to not feel like right up my ears when listening to music or playing games just like Valorant or R6, where these are like neither good nor bad for gaming in terms of imaging, as I don't find these to have that holographic feel that I get with something like the Daybreaks or the Truth Here Hexo, in which case it doesn't provide that pinpoint accuracy that I look for when I recommend something specifically for gaming. However, I said that it's neither good nor bad, which also means that these won't put you at a significant like disadvantage when playing esports titles, but they also won't be providing any sort of like a significant advantages when compared to IEMs like that I've mentioned before that are good for directional sound cues. Although what these do relatively well would be like the speed, separation, and the detail retrieval, where the bass is tuned to a certain extent that it doesn't hit deep but it hits fast and precise. And on that note, because I perceive these as like a fast sounding IEM, the details and the separation associated with said speed is actually quite nice, where I can pick out instruments well enough, and pieces like Test Drive by London Music Works and Summer by Joe Hisaishi fairly well. Now, with that description, the distinction of like if whether this is worth $179 or 10,600 pesos should have already been answered for you and by you, where if I had to enforce a conclusion, I would actually recommend these to anybody who wants a laid-back sounding IEM, or those who wants like a decent reference sounding IEM for audio and light music production work as a probably like potential third piece in the workflow if you have the money. In which case, I place the Ziigaat Lush at an A- tier, where I really enjoy using these for like editing audio like the one that you're watching right now, or like the past two videos that I uploaded recently. This has been Ziigaat Lush. I'm Charles, and goodbye.